Ah, Gravity Falls, we're gonna miss you. If you didn't already know, the conclusion to the show was aired this past month and it was really fantastic, much like the show overall. It had a very captivating and mysterious atmosphere, grand visuals, and outstanding characters that many fans grew to love. It was also a huge part of what many consider to be the cartoon revival of the early 2010s, and was the first good Disney Channel cartoon in a very long time. To add on to this, the comedy in Gravity Falls was really good, with a lot of quick, well-built-up jokes, and some subtle adult jokes that really had me laughing. After the recent series finale, I decided to create the top 13 Gravity Falls episodes list to highlight the great success of this brilliant cartoon series. So, let's get started with the list. Number 13. Northwest Mansion Noir. This episode starts out with Pacifica Northwest, Mabel's arch-rival, asking for Dipper's help with what seems to be a ghost problem at the Northwest Mansion. This coincides with the upcoming annual party at the mansion strictly for the upper class of Gravity Falls. Dipper agrees with the exception that Mabel and her friends Granda and Candy are allowed to attend the party. Subsequently, Dipper and Pacifica attempt to track down the ghost in order to prevent the guests from being harmed. They end up catching the lumberjack ghoul and trapping him in a mirror. As Dipper is about to get rid of the mirror, the ghost explains how he was betrayed by the Northwest family many years ago and is now trying to set things right by allowing all of Gravity Falls to partake in the party. Dipper then sets the ghost free and things go awry as all of the guests are frozen in wood. Pacifica then has to make the tough decision whether to obey her parents or do the right thing. I really enjoyed this episode because of the chemistry between Dipper and Pacifica. Pacifica had formerly been a standard bully character, but in this episode she rises to the occasion and allows all of Gravity Falls to enjoy the party. Also, the atmosphere in this episode is pitch perfect, as it really seems like a noir or a classic mystery story. The subplot with Mabel and her friends is also enjoyable and gets a few laughs. Overall, this is a really enjoyable episode. Number 12. Dipper and Mabel versus the future. In this later Season 2 episode, we see how Dipper and Mabel are coming to terms with the inevitable end to summer. Mabel at first remains positive about the ordeal with the hope of the twins' 13th birthday party, but she soon realizes that she and Dipper will leave a lot behind in Gravity Falls when they leave at the end of the summer. Dipper has little time to think about the situation as he is called by Great Uncle Ford to help him with an expedition. Ford then takes Dipper to an old alien crash site in order to find something to fix the rift in the space-time continuum. It is really nice to see Dipper and Ford adventuring it up and having a good time together, as the only episode to do this was Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons. We also see how stressed out Mabel is because none of her friends could attend the birthday party. Things take a turn for the worse at the crash site when Dipper has to save Ford from alien technology. After being saved, Ford offers Dipper a chance to stay in Gravity Falls and work and study with him. It's a great opportunity for Dipper, but doing this would mean abandoning Mabel. Mabel happens to overhear the conversation and thinks that Dipper is for sure going to stay with Great Uncle Ford in Gravity Falls and gets even more depressed. When Dipper and Ford return, she runs out of the house and finds Blendin Blandin, who offers her a chance to make summer for her last forever. She agrees, unknowingly allowing Bill Cipher, disguised as Blendin Blandin, a chance to cause the apocalypse. Mabel is then trapped in a bubble and Bill breaks the rift, holding him back on Gravity Falls. There's a lot of emotion in this episode, especially for Mabel, and it makes me think of the dread of returning to school after summer break and just how plain crummy it feels. All the story and adventuring combined really makes this a very enjoyable episode. Number 11. The Tale of Two Stands. This episode takes place after Great Uncle Ford's return to Gravity Falls, and it tells of all the events that led up to Ford being trapped in the portal. It displays the relationship that Stanley and Stanford had growing up as kids and all the hijinks that they got themselves into. They were each other's best and only friend, with Ford being the brain and Stan being the muscle of the pair. However, Stan accidentally screws up Ford's chance to get into a good college after fearing that he might lose his brother. Ford discovers that it was Stan who had messed up his project, and they get into a fight. This forces Stan to leave home and become a con artist, and Ford continues his studies of the bizarre. Ford takes residence in Gravity Falls after noticing all the anomalies. Stan eventually comes to be with his brother and accidentally causes Ford to become trapped in the portal. Ford leaves his first journal with Stan, who has to find the other journals in order to get his brother back. I really love how we get to see Stan and Ford going up together as best friends and how their relationship develops. It's really nice to get a lot of answers to questions that have been prevalent throughout the series, such as, does Stan have a brother, who wrote the journals, and what happens once the portal is activated. I really like this episode as it gives us a lot of backstory and fills in some blanks that really needed filling. Number 10. Seuss and the Real Girl. Boy, oh boy, this episode was creepy. We start off by seeing Seuss desperately trying to get a girlfriend in the Mystery Shack. He eventually gives up and buys a dating simulator game that he finds to be a lot easier than trying to get a real girlfriend. He spends a lot of time with Giffany, the girl in the game, and Dipper and Mabel find that he's been skipping work and losing a lot of his social life in order to play the game. Dipper and Mabel see that spending too much time with the game has had a negative effect on Seuss and try to help him out by getting him out of the house and trying to find a real girl. Giffany gets mad that Seuss left her and leaves the computer in hopes to track him down. At the mall, Seuss actually meets a nice girl that he finds to be a bit like him, as they both like Hoo-Haw Owl's Jamboree. They decide to go on a date there, but Giffany still wants Seuss to be her forever boyfriend. Consequently, while on the date, Giffany possesses the animatronics there and attempts to download Seuss's brain into the game with her. Also, there's a subplot where Grunkle Stan's trying to make money by stealing one of the animatronics. A lot of things are well done in this episode, with the awkward humor with Seuss, to the creepy tone that ended with Giffany being an insanely creepy stalker and the terrifying animatronics. I also enjoy the message that if you spend too much time online, then you'll miss all the real things going on around you. This also makes it a really good episode. Number 9. Tourist Trapped. This episode was a great way to open up the series. It displays all the mystery and bizarreness of Gravity Falls and also introduces us to all the main characters really well. We first see Dipper and Mabel arriving at Gravity Falls and adapting to all the weirdness. Dipper sees all the weird things going on that their great Uncle Stan pays no mind to. He also finds a journal in the woods that has a record of a lot of the strange things that happen in the falls. All the while, Mabel seems to have found a boyfriend that Dipper suspects is actually a zombie. Dipper follows Mabel and her boyfriend around as Mabel seems to be unaware of all the creepy things that her boyfriend is doing. Dipper becomes increasingly worried and follows them on their date. It turns out that Mabel's boyfriend was a group of gnomes, and Mabel declines the gnomes' marriage proposal. The gnomes get mad and try to capture Mabel in order to make her their queen. Dipper picks up Mabel on the golf cart and they evade the giant gnome monster that chases them. They end up defeating the gnomes in the end, and Dipper begins to wonder what other outlandish things that he and Mabel will encounter during the summer. I really like the campiness this episode has, with a good wilderness atmosphere and the unique characters that we are first introduced to. I also enjoy how both Mabel and Dipper are given a little taste of all the weird things that they will experience in the course of the show. I believe this is one of the best pilot episodes I've seen in a cartoon, and it definitely deserves a spot on this list. Number 8. Weirdmageddon Part 2. At last we arrive at the Weirdmageddon trilogy. These are most definitely the weirdest of all the Gravity Falls episodes. Now, Part 2 takes place after Dipper, Wendy, and Seuss arrive at Mabel's bubble. They think that Mabel is being tortured in the bubble, but once they enter, they find that the whole bubble is just one big fantasy world for Mabel. They eventually find Mabel and find out that she doesn't want to leave the bubble because summer in there is never ending. The others try to convince her to leave because all of Gravity Falls is being controlled by Bill and they need her help to save Great Uncle Ford and the others. Mabel has everything she wants in the bubble, but Dipper is arrested by the Waffle Guard and taken to court for mentioning reality. In court, Mabel realizes that you can't just hide from reality and decides to leave Mabelland. However, the residents of Mabelland don't want her to leave and try to keep her there. The group escapes and returns to the Mystery Shack, where they all surprisingly find a lot of their friends hiding out there. I absolutely love Mabelland with all the tacky and zany characters that we can definitely see Mabel bringing to life and interacting with. The humor in this episode is also really good, with Dippy Fresh and the court scene in which we saw the return of Zyler and Kraz's lawyers, also the Mabel jury, and Judge Kitty Cat Meow Meow Schwartzstein. Mabelland is also a very goofy place and is exactly what you think a world controlled by Mabel would be like. This is another good episode. Number 7. Into the Bunker. This episode's a great Dipper, Mabel, Seuss, and Wendy combo episode. We surprisingly didn't really see a lot of that dynamic before this episode, and this was a real first adventure episode in Season 2. Anyways, this episode starts out with Dipper and Wendy watching old horror movies together. Dipper then invites Wendy to a mystery hunt with him, Mabel, and Seuss the next day. On their expedition, they find a secret hiding place that they believe to be the author's and venture down into the bunker. They discover that the author could still be living in the bunker, however, they are caught up by a trap. After solving the puzzle in the trap, Mabel discovers that Dipper still likes Wendy and tries to help motivate him by trapping him in a room with Wendy. They find another way out and stumble upon what they believe to be the author, voiced by Mark Hamill. He explains that one of his creatures has escaped and Dipper uses the journal to help him. They realize that the author was actually a doppelganger monster, and Wendy and Dipper try to get the journal back from him with the help of Mabel and Seuss. Also, the absolute best part of this episode is the way Wendy just kicks the tail out of the monster. She's a complete boss in this episode and steals the show for sure. They eventually freeze the monster and return to the surface with the author's laptop. Dipper then confesses his feelings for Wendy, and she says that she always knew that he kinda liked her, and they still remain friends. This episode really set the standard for Season 2, and this is why it deserves a number 7 spot on this list. Number 6. Weirdmageddon Part 1. We now go to the first of the Weirdmageddon trilogy that begins right where we left off from Dipper and Mabel versus the future. Bill Cipher is now running rampant in Gravity Falls after summoning his apocalyptic friends, the Hench Maniacs. Dipper and Ford quickly race off to stop him in his tracks. This leads to Ford being captured after missing his chance to stop Bill. The journals are then destroyed by Bill, and Dipper flees for his life. Bill freezes the majority of the Gravity Falls townsfolk, and he turns it into his very own dystopian playground full of weirdness waves and insanity bubbles. Dipper runs into Wendy at the mall, and they make a plan to rescue Mabel and eventually Ford as well. Meanwhile, Bill takes out all the Time Police along with Time Baby. Wendy and Dipper find a car that they could use to get to Mabel's bubble, but they're ambushed by Little Gideon and his jail posse. They hijack a car, and this leads to the car chase. After the Mad Max style chase they have, Gideon has a change of heart and goes to attack Bill in order to help save Mabel. Wendy and Dipper meet up with Seuss, and the episode ends with them about to enter Mabel's bubble. Much like in the last entry, Wendy is an absolute boss in this episode as well. I also believe this is one of the first fantastic episodes that Gravity Falls had, because it really seems like a huge part in the overall story. The absolute anarchy that takes place in the episode is very captivating, along with all the crazy humor that the episode has to offer. I definitely think that you should check this one out. Number 5. The Time Traveler's Pig. This episode takes place at the fair that is being run by Uncle Stan. As you can imagine, all the rides and attractions are very cheap. Dipper hangs out with Wendy as Mabel notices a pig that she just can't get over. Meanwhile, Dipper is trying to impress Wendy by winning her a stuffed animal, but accidentally hits her in the eye with the baseball. Mabel wins the pig. However, while Dipper was trying to get ice for Wendy's eye, Robbie, Dipper's arch-rival, swoops in and asks Wendy out. She accepts, and she and Robbie go off and hang out with each other, leaving Dipper all by himself. He meets up with Mabel, and they bump into a strange man. That strange man ends up being Blandon, a time traveler from the future. Dipper wants Blandon's help in order to fix what happened to Wendy and stop Robbie from asking her out. Blandon says that's out of the question, so Dipper and Mabel steal his time travel device. Dipper repeatedly tries to go back and not hit Wendy in the eye, but to no avail, and Mabel wants to relive herself getting the pig who she named Waddles. Dipper determines that he needs Mabel's help in order to fix the past, and it ends up working. However, Waddles is taken by Pacifica instead of her. This makes Mabel sad, and they both end up traveling further back in time, arguing over the time traveling device. Dipper wins out and sees how depressed Mabel is after losing her pig. He sets things right by going back and allowing Wendy to be hit with the ball in the eye, and Mabel gets her pig. Blandon notices their activity and calls him out, but is misunderstood and taken to time prison, vowing revenge on the Pines twins. This episode really does a good job with the time travel dynamic, and also shows how some things are destined to happen, such as Wendy getting hit with the eye and Mabel getting the pig. The episode also bonded Dipper and Mabel together by Dipper letting Mabel keep Waddles. The humor in this episode is also particularly good, and it's fun seeing what a cheap fair run by the cheapest con man alive would be like. Number 4. Dreamscapers. We start out with Gideon attempting to break in and steal the deed to the Mystery Shack. Stan catches him and forces him out of the shack. He then puts the deed in a safe and memorizes a new code for that safe. Meanwhile, Dipper feels that he's always treated unfairly by Stan and forced to do all the hard work for him. Afterwards, Gideon uses the journal to summon Bill Cipher in order to steal the code from Stan's mind. Mabel and Seuss see what Gideon plans to do and try to warn the others, but it's too late as Bill enters Stan's mind. Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss follow Bill into Grunkle Stan's mind and they try to beat Bill to the passcode. Here we are first introduced to Zyler and Kraz, Mabel's imaginary neon-colored boyfriends, as a try to help, but just mainly there for comedic purposes. Dipper finds a memory of Stan berating him and gets more annoyed with Stan. He decides that he won't help Stan because of all the mistreatment that he has given him. The others find the code, but Bill, pretending to be Seuss, steals it from the group. Dipper then discovers the reason of his poor treatment in a memory, and it turns out that Grunkle Stan was just trying to help and motivate him to become a better man. Dipper then realizes that he can manipulate objects in Stan's head and rushes off to help the others. The group then destroys the code and attempts to battle Bill, leading to them ultimately winning. Bill spares them, saying that they could be useful further down the road. But they realize while they're in Stan's head, Gideon broke in and stole the deed from the safe, leaving us with a to-be-continued ending. We'll get to see a lot of unique imagery and also experience a lot of funny jokes that really piece together to make a great episode. All the characters are good, and the story is also really good, and we even get formally introduced to the isosceles demon himself, Bill Cipher. There's really a lot to like in this particular episode. Number 3. Gideon Rises. Now that Gideon has a mystery shack, the Pines family is forced to move in with Seuss. They try to call out Gideon for his trickery, but the townsfolk are just in love with Gideon and believe that Grunkle Stan is the real trickster. Stan decides that it's best that Dipper and Mabel move back to California for the remainder of the summer. Dipper and Mabel don't want to leave Gravity Falls and attempt to take back the shack with the help of the gnomes. Nevertheless, Gideon turns the gnomes against the twins and they steal the journal from Dipper. Dipper and Mabel are out of options and decide to leave. However, Gideon realizes that he only has 2 of the 3 journals and believes that Dipper is hiding the last one. He suits up in a giant robot and pursues Dipper and Mabel as they leave the town on the bus. Gideon then captures the twins and takes away Mabel to be his queen. Dipper gets irritated and jumps into the robot and fights Gideon. After the battle, Grunkle Stan shows up and explains to the townspeople that Gideon was a hoax and he used hidden cameras to spy on everyone. Gideon is then arrested and Stan gets Gideon's journals and is also declared a hero. The shack is repaired and everything seems back to normal. But Stan takes the journals to his underground hideout and reveals that he had the remaining journal. He uses the journals to activate a portal, and the season is left out on a cliffhanger. This was a great finale for Season 1 as it wrapped up the majority of events that happened in that season. It also shows that Dipper doesn't necessarily need the journal because he triumphs over Gideon all by himself, of course with the help of Mabel. I also like how we get to see all the journals together and also discover their purpose. We also find out what exactly Stan was hiding behind the vending machine. This was a great finale and a very great episode as well. Number 2. Not What He Seems. Not What He Seems is easily the most suspense-filled episode that we ever got from Gravity Falls. It begins with Dipper, Mabel, and Grunkle Stan all enjoying a fun Saturday with illegal fireworks and water balloons. All of a sudden, the government shows up and arrests Stan, accusing him of stealing toxic waste and planning to build a doomsday device. Stan is taken away and the twins are taken in a car away from the mystery shack, which is now under government control. Dipper and Mabel break free and try to find evidence to prove Stan innocent. They go back into the mystery shack and break into Stan's room. Once inside, they find the surveillance film along with a bunch of fake IDs, contraband, and newspaper articles that claim Stan Pines was found dead many years ago. They begin to suspect that Stan isn't all he says to be after seeing that Stan really did steal waste on the tape. They then find the code for Stan's secret room behind the vending machine. While all this is going on, Stan calls Seuss and tells him to guard the vending machine with his life. He also escapes the building where he's being held captive and makes his way back to the mystery shack. Dipper and Mabel encounter Seuss and eventually get the door open and venture down to Stan's secret room. Then they discover the portal that Stan had down there and realize that the countdown clock is almost finished. They then try to manually override the portal, but Stan gets there right before they shut it down. He tries to convince the group that he really is Stan Pines, but Dipper is skeptical and tries to shut it down. The whole place loses gravity, and Mabel is the only one that could be able to shut down the portal. She trusts Stan and does not shut down the portal as it opens, causing the group to be thrown across the room. A figure emerges from the portal, and we then find out who the author is, and also that Stan had a twin brother. This episode is my personal favorite because it really gives us a lot of mystery, suspense, and humor that the series is known for. Also, it gives us a glimpse at who the author is and what exactly happens when the portal is activated. As a bonus, there are also a lot of dramatic moments with Mabel deciding whether or not to trust Stan, and the twins discovering that Stan might not actually be Stan. Overall, this is a fantastic episode, and I definitely recommend you go check it out. And the number 1 Gravity Falls episode is Weirdmageddon Part 3. Where to start with this episode? This episode is the series finale, and it really does an outstanding job wrapping up the series while at the same time still adding a lot to it. This episode begins right where we left off from Weirdmageddon Part 2 with Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss realizing that a lot of survivors are taking refuge in the Mystery Shack. Stan's become the chief of the group, and he just wants to wait out the apocalypse and survive as long as possible. Dipper and Mabel state they have to do something in order to stop Bill and save Ford and the rest of the town. Everyone but Stan agrees, and we see a lot of past characters come back, such as Rumble and Skirmish from Fight Fighters, Candy and Grenda, Pacifica, the Manotar, Old Man McGucket, the Unicorns several times, and the Multi-Bear, along with a bunch more. Stan reminds the group that the shack is the only thing protecting them from Bill, so the group decides to build a giant robot mech using the house. They also use the Gobblewonker and a giant T-Rex as an arm, as well as a bunch of miscellaneous things. After constructing the robot, they go to Bill's castle in the sky and attack all the henchmaniacs. After doing so, they deploy a rescue team consisting of Dipper, Mabel, Stan, Wendy, Seuss, Pacifica, and Officer Blubbs to go in and rescue the townsfolk and Ford. They free all the townspeople with the help of Gideon, and Ford shows everyone the only remaining way to stop Bill. They create the Bill Cipher Wheel consisting of all the symbols that correlate to certain characters in the show, such as Dipper being the pine tree. The townspeople all flee, and the remaining people get in the circle and hold hands, except for Stan, who is upset because he never got thanked by Ford for getting him out of the portal. Ford thanks him, but the two get into a fight and ruin the only chance that they had to destroy Bill. Bill then arrives and captures everyone but the Pines family. He puts Stan and Ford in a cage, and then he chases Dipper and Mabel, threatening to kill them unless he gets the code from Ford that can show him how to get out of Gravity Falls. Ford then agrees, and Bill enters his mind. However, it turns out that Stan pretended to be Ford, and then Ford uses the memory eraser gun on Stan. Bill is then destroyed. However, Stan's memory is also destroyed, and he can't remember anything about himself. Mabel tries to show him a scrapbook that they made over the course of the summer to try to get his memory back. It seems to work as Stan remembers everything, and everything in Gravity Falls returns back to normal. They then have a huge party for Dipper and Mabel's 13th birthday, and Stan is also declared a hero. Dipper and Mabel then leave Gravity Falls, saying goodbye to everyone, and Ford and Stan go off adventuring together, like how they imagined as kids. Goodness gracious, this episode was good. It is a fantastic example of how to properly end a series. The characters all came together to vanquish Bill, and as cliche as that is surprisingly well done. I really like how they ended Gravity Falls, as it didn't get cancelled, but it actually ended the story how it was supposed to, unlike many other shows. This concludes my top 13 Gravity Falls episodes list. If you'd like to see more, please comment down a suggestion in the comment section below. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you guys have a good day. See you later.